today. Good evening, everyone. I am Karen Burks with United Christian Faith Ministries. Here at United Christian Faith Ministries, we'll be discussing economics and education and elections on tonight. I am so very excited to share with you our panelists that will be talking about all of the great things pertaining to this upcoming election, how it impacts you financially, your vote, right? So before we get started, I definitely want you all to like, share, invite people into this conversation that we'll have on tonight. We have so many distinguished panelists that will just share this information with you on best practices of what that looks like when you're casting your vote for this particular election. So before we get started, we're going to go into prayer. Sister Yvonne Bay will lead us into prayer, and then we'll go right into our discussion on tonight with our panelists, with our moderator as well. So, Sister Yvonne?
Heavenly Father, we invite you in your presence to be in the midst of this panel and those under the sound of the discussion. We thank you for the spirit of truth, bringing forth clarity to the citizens during a time of decision making. We continue to pray for our elected officials as they make initiatives for better living conditions for our communities. Father, we thank you for God-fearing officials, their sound decision making, and protecting them and their families. Father, we praise you and magnify your mighty works throughout our communities in the name of Jesus.
All right, we have Sister Andrea that will be leading the discussion within moderating on tonight. So I'll let her take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you all for participating in our virtual engagement tonight with our esteemed panelists for a discussion of economics and education in elections. I want to take a few minutes to introduce our panel members. First, we have Sierra Hart. Sierra serves as the External Relations Manager for Ed Trust in Louisiana, where she focuses on consistent community engagement, advocacy, and student voice to highlight education inequities in the state. As a former teacher, she has experienced the frustration and exhaustion felt by so many educators in our public schools, often fighting uphill for her students to have all the opportunities they deserve. Prior to joining Ed Trust, Sierra was a community organizer with the South Louisiana Coalition for Education, where she collaborated with parents, caregivers, and families, and other stakeholders to fight for greater equity and better outcomes for kids in urban centers and rural areas. In the fall of 2019, Sierra vied to be the District 6 member of the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education in hopes of creating equitable policies for all students. Although the results were not in her favor, 40,000 constituents across Southern Louisiana voted for a vision of hashtag equity for all. In 2020, Sierra was elected to local Democratic Party leadership, where she worked for 4 years to increase voter engagement and advocacy amongst younger generations. A former public school history teacher, student advocate, and proud North Louisiana native, Sierra is committed to making Louisiana a better place to live, learn, and raise a family. We welcome you, Sierra, to the panel. Next, we have Miss Joyce James. Joyce James is a dedicated grassroots community organizer who advocates for changes to public policies that may hinder the economic and financial development of residents in economic communities in Louisiana, rather low-income communities in Louisiana. She serves as president of the Middleburg Institute, a 501c3 charitable organization that promotes equity, equality, economic empowerment, and entrepreneurial innovations. Ms. James holds a Master's of Business Administration degree from Southern University A&M College in Baton Rouge and a certificate of completion in creating collaborative solutions, Innovations in Governance from Harvard's Kennedy School. She has successfully completed the program at LSU Stevenson Entrepreneurship Institute, acknowledged as the boot camp for entrepreneurs, and has earned a certificate of completion in results-based facilitation. Furthermore, Joyce is a certified Core 4 trainer and a Louisiana Department of Economic Development Edward Lowe Peer Perspectives facilitator. Joyce firmly believes that financially empowered individuals play a significant role in advancing Louisiana as a state. Beyond her professional pursuits, Joyce is an enthusiastic reader, dramatist, and a dedicated volunteer for social justice, financial, and economic equity causes. Welcome, Ms. James, to the panel.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson is currently the Senior VP of External Affairs for Delta Utilities. He previously served as Chief Diversity Officer for Bernhard Capital Partners, a private equity firm headquartered in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Michael has also been a practicing attorney for over 25 years. While at Bernhard, Michael was responsible for leading measurable approaches to more equitable and inclusive work environments for the BCP portfolio companies. He maintains responsibility for ESG, DEI in his current role for Delta Utilities. Michael graduated from the Southern University Law Center in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and has utilized his legal background in diverse ways. Michael was elected to the Louisiana legislature, where he served the people of the state as a state representative for District 61 for 3 consecutive 4-year terms. Michael was also a participant in the executive training program at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. Throughout his legal career, he has represented and litigated for both plaintiffs and defendants in business and property insurance matters. He has also worked as an organizational and founding development leader of CareSouth Medical and Dental Health Center, a federally qualified primary care health center whose main site is in Baton Rouge, with branches throughout the state of Louisiana. Michael most recently serves CareSouth as its general counsel. Michael is married to Stephanie Gissendander Jackson, and they have 2 daughters, Nia and Cameron. Welcome, Mr. Jackson, to the panel. So this is a panel discussion. So we're going to start off with our first question, and we're going to ask Ms. Sierra Hart to start us off with the discussion. The first question, Ms. Hart, as it relates to voting, how are economics and education defined?
Hi, y'all. Good evening. That's such a great question. I think it really depends on who we're asking. If we ask politicians how they define economics and education, depending on the position, we'll hear them talk about economic empowerment, maybe economic stability, and how we improve our communities in North Baton Rouge specifically. We hear a lot of that in our local elections. If we think about federally, we're looking at inflation and how grocery prices have escalated. Businesses have been increasing their prices, so it's difficult for families to make a living. And I think if we look at education, we can think about multiple levers of where it's state, local, higher ed, and collegiate. And so it really just depends on who we're asking. But I think for me as a community member, economics is about how we make sure that every family has what they need to survive. And for education, every child has an equitable right to education, and that we're ensuring that there is funding for every child to have that.
Thank you, Sierra. Does anyone else on the panel want to provide comment to that question?
I'd like to jump in here. Hello, everyone. I want to start by thanking the United Faith Christian Ministries for having us on. I'm just honored to be a part of this panel, and thank Karen for inviting me. And I agree with you, Ms. Hart. When we talk about economics and education, it clearly depends on who you ask. But if we look at the root word, where this word comes from and what it means, I'm going to just kind of briefly read it to you so I won't mess it up, is economy. It refers to the system or the structure, the production and the distribution of and the consumption of goods and services within a society. So if we take it from that level and then add economics to it, then it gives it a overall connotation of what we need to be talking about. Because as she stated, it depends on who you ask, but the true meaning of the word is, as I stated, it is a system. It's a system that was set in place, and it's from the Greek word ecos, monos. So that's how economics is defined. Of course, we all know what education is. And then again, I agree with Ms. Hart on that. Depends on who you speak to. So if you're talking to some politicians, they may say something like financial literacy, or they may say something about, how do you manage your money? How astute you are, or do you have advanced degrees? And then if you talk about the economics of that, we can talk about student debt. We can talk about the cost to advance education. We can talk about a lot of things that education, that surrounds education and economics. But both of those words are very important to any political climate, especially in a democratic society.
Okay. Oh, we can't hear you, Mr. Jackson.
Okay.
Oh, can't hear you.
How about now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Um, Let me first begin by echoing comments for the opportunity to share some ideas with this group and to the church for wanting to get more information out to its parishioners. I mean, and we're in a time where churches are kind of shying away from these types of discussions. So I applaud Pastor Ellis and the United Christian Faith Ministries and the folks that are serving on the panel for being willing to have these types of discussion and in a faith-based setting. So great way to start the conversation. I think it's when you talk about economics and education, there are two very fundamental aspects of what I consider to be the foundation for a well-functioning economic system. I'll wear a lot of different hats, but I'll revert back to my hat as a elected official. As one of the things we struggled with was how do you create a balanced effort in communities that don't have the economics that are necessary for it to flourish. And one of the things I learned there are 5 ingredients to a well functioning economic system, and whether that's we're talking about a community, a state, or we're talking about dealing with your personal finances. And those ingredients are: one, you got to have superior higher education. At first and foremost, higher education is foundation for economics. And if you look at cities and states that are flourishing, higher ed is a big part of it. Secondly, having a high tech capacity. We're living in an age and a state where high tech is ruling the day. AI is a big topic of conversation right now. Those who are able to manage high tech capacity will be the ones that flourish the most in this economic system. The investment in infrastructure helps to spur along economic development. Access to capital, probably the biggest thing. You'll hear me say that a number of times in this conversation about having the ability to have access to capital will help us personally, and it helps us as a state. And then being to engage in public and private partnerships with folks that have the resources and have the capacity. So economics and education fundamental to us personally and as states in moving forward economically.
Thank you. So, based on what you all have added to the discussion, how can the average citizen influence economic policies?
That's easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
I want to add something to what Mr. Jackson said, and he talked about the 5 points. And I mean, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but there are so many other components that we have to look at when we talk about the economic security of the totality of a state. And I'm going to focus here on Louisiana, and that would be affordable access to education. We have institutes of higher learning here, but do we have affordable access for those that want to attend those universities? Of course, technology, where there's a great digital divide in this state. Transportation is an issue. If you don't have the proper transportation, how can you participate in the educational component without the technology? Everybody doesn't have the computers or hotspots, and we need expanded safety nets. And I'm saying this because I'm hopeful that Mr. Jackson will be hearing what I say, and then we can put his name back on the ballot. And housing, affordable housing, health and welfare. Without having quality health care, all of this that we're talking about is for naught, because if you're not healthy, you cannot participate in a just and economic society, which we all, I think, agree on this panel tonight, and those that are probably listening, that's one of the major things that we need to focus on: healthcare and education in the state of Louisiana, which is two of the first things that we often see being cut in the political grand scheme of things. So I'm sorry, I'll take your question. What was it? I forgot about it. Well, you asked Ms. Morrison, you said something, and I was like, let me go back to.
Yeah. So the question was, how can the average citizen influence economic policies?
I can hop in.
Go ahead.
I think it just requires a citizen to show up. And whether that is at a city council meeting, if you're trying to influence the budgetary process for your local city, if you want to improve the amount of small businesses that come into your city, it's about showing up to city council meetings and being able to learn what advocates are there to communicate with. Maybe you need to learn from them to see who are the people on the board that we can push to actually do more and get things done. I really think it requires us to educate ourselves on what policies are accessible, because like Ms. Joyce said, it is easier said than done to show up and say, I want to create these economic policies or I want to shape policies if you aren't educated. So show up and educate yourself on the process so that you feel informed and engaged.
Yeah, 100%. And I would only add that uh, uh, showing up is very, very important, but also being able to understand who those folks are that are representing you, and even being able to influence them. You'll be surprised how much an individual can influence the political process by just having a conversation with their representative and letting them understand, because if they're doing a job, they're there to represent you. And so your opinion matters. And so if you're able to communicate with them in regard to, if you're a student, that you want your student debt, to be paid for, to be wiped away, then that's something that your state representative or your congressman ought to consider when those opportunities to vote for those measures come up. If you're a person that's starting a family, and you want to own a home, then your ability to express to your representative that that's important to you, then he ought to be able to, vote and support that measure because it's important to his constituency.
I'll take that too. One of the most important things that I find how to influence public policy and also get to the heart sometimes of those that are the decision makers or the ones that we voted for or we've put in place to represent us. First thing is to vote. I find that when we do campaigns through the Middleburg, and often when we write letters, when we tell stories, when we make phone calls, we have to first and foremost be informed about what we're advocating for or against. And then also we have to know who the decision maker is, what committee they sit on, how much power they have, how much influence they have, because as you all know, we're in a very divided time. So even though you may have a representative and you're informed, how much power, how much influence does that person that you voted for and put in place, how much can they really do without you? And without you, it's a little that can be done. So as a citizen and a constituent, you must vote. You must be registered to vote. Because I found that when we do campaigns and we call and say, hey, we have a concern, we want bill number 529 to be expanded or whatever, the first thing that the person on the other end typically does is say, well, give me your address. And and I know that when they ask for the address and who am I speaking with, the next thing that they're doing when I hang up is looking to see if I'm a registered voter, because registering to vote is your voice. And that's not just a little saying. So we have to be proactive. And so there's several ways that we can do that. Like I said, we can write letters, we can tell stories. I find that storytelling is the best way to tug on the moral heart, is by letting people who are making decisions, remind them of that the people that look like them and may not even look like them, let them tell their stories of how the laws that they are maybe considering or putting in place are egregious to them, or those laws have helped them. If you're talking about doing away with SNAP, then and you have a room full of folks and you're of the impression as a policymaker that it only impacts a certain group of people, and then you actually see what the data shows, it may make you think a little bit differently about doing away with SNAP.
So I've heard us say that we need to show up, we need to have a voice, we need to know who we're voting for to keep the discussion going. Let's add to that. How does voting or the failure to vote impact our well-being and quality of life as citizens?
Mm, that's good.
That's real good.
I can go again.
Go
I
ahead.
Go.
So I love to say Louisiana is not a red state, but a non-voting state. And if you look at the data, we not showing up, not just I put a lot of blame on Black folks for not showing up, but holistically, Louisiana citizens just don't show up to vote. Historically, we do not show up to vote on both sides of the aisle, and we have saw what that has led to in the conditions of our community, with us ranking in the 40s and 50s in every category, with Louisiana being number 50 out of all states, according to what opportunities are available. And so when we don't show up and vote, we see the outcomes of that. We see a lack of disinvestment in our community. We see a lack of accountability in our elected officials, because we are not the ones who are choosing them. They're being chosen from a small majority. And when you don't have a direct pull from a candidate because you didn't put the attention into electing them, then you don't have a certain level of accountability for that candidate, unfortunately. And so I think if we don't vote, we really, unfortunately, kind of bear some of the burden of the circumstances of our community, because we give away our right and our voice in that way. And so in order to change Louisiana from being 50, in order to hold our elected officials accountable, voting is the way that we do that.
I agree. I think that being able to hold not only your representatives, but also to the system itself, it's about being accountable. And so when you vote as an elected official, I mean, I certainly pay attention to folks who have a vote and participate in the process. The squeaky wheel gets the oil, and certainly being a registered voter makes me stand up and listen to what you have to say and what's on your mind. Again, I think it's about being accountable to the folks that you represent. And if you don't participate in the process, you can best bet that your representatives are doing not what you want, but what's expedient for them under the circumstances. And if they're left to their devices, sometimes they vote in ways in which it's not representative of the people that elected them.
Well, I know you all have heard this before. You never ask a question, you never answer a question with a question. Y'all heard that before? So when we're working in communities and people often tell us, well, why vote? That's just a waste of time. They're gonna do what they want to do anyway. And I asked them a question. So some of the questions I asked, I said, so do you care how much taxes you pay? Do you care how much your utility bill is? Do you want to own a home? Do you want to have quality education for your children? Would you like to have better roads and streets? And when you ask that question, and of course people say yes, and I'm like, well, how do you get those things done? And they say, well, how? You get it done by electing policymakers who will vote for the things that you want and that you need to better your quality of life. So it's a question with a question, and then then the light bulb comes on. Well, I think I better go vote, or I better register to vote.
All right. Thank you all. So let's look at, we have several elections coming up soon. We have local elections, we have national elections. So based on what you said so far, how does my vote affect the local economy? We have our mayoral race and several other races. In addition, if you could also comment on how my vote affects the national economy.
Well, I think when you look at local, there are elections that impact us locally, and certainly those that affect us on the national level. But local votes can affect everything from stormwater infrastructure to recreation to crime and how crime is dealt with in your community. So it can definitely have an impact on your quality of life. And so when we look at national elections, we're looking at this election that we're faced with right now. A choice between one of the candidates, the Trump administration, who wants to continue to give tax advantages to the rich, versus the Harris campaign, who's talking about an opportunity for average people, and actually giving opportunity in the form of a child tax credit. $3,600, I understand, is what they're offering for each, or for per child, and extending that to $6,000 for any newborn. They're talking about housing. They're talking about tax benefits to small business and to individuals. And so for the average person, it certainly appears that the Harris campaign is offering tangible opportunities for people that they can actually feel in their pocketbook. But the question, I guess the question is how does it impact? It impacts us greatly. When I was a student, I mean, one of the things that allowed me to go to school was access to financial assistance. So back then it was a Pell Grant and a student loan, and so access to capital, one of those things I talked about earlier, that ability to have access to capital laid the groundwork for me getting a college degree and then going on a law school and also getting that degree. So so these types of things don't happen through osmosis, but it's a part of the process of participating in the process. And it can definitely impact your quality of life if you're in a position to take advantage of it.
And I would add to that and say, when you look at our local elections, we have our mayoral race and we also have city council elections. And both of those elections are heavily impacted by what our economy will look like. Your city council decides what businesses will be in your community, what the quality of your neighborhoods look like. And so when we are voting for our city councilman, that is the most proximate you will see the economic development and the opportunity for economic development to be a thriving factor in your community. If I'm looking at the mayor, that's opportunity to not only just revitalize Baton Rouge, but develop downtown, increase the amount of small businesses, take money from the federal government and grants to be able to support those businesses, help develop early learning centers for our children. There are so many opportunities and so much money that is available federally, that our mayoral, whoever is in that position, can be able to pull from. And so those two positions are highly impacted by our economy. And for federally, we're looking at candidates like Mr. Michael Jackson said, who are on totally different ends of the spectrum. But if we think about economic policies specifically, whoever is in office is going to determine what money can come to our community. And I think it's important to know what issues they are championing. And so if one side does not believe that the Department of Education should exist, then that means we won't have access to Pell Grant. That would eliminate the amount of financial aid being given to Black and brown people who utilize financial aid to go to college. And so your federal government determines how much money you can get on a local level, down from what grants are accessible to you, what money they're filtering into your local government. And so on both ends of the coin, whether it's federal or local, we play a role in deciding what our economic opportunity will be by who we vote for.
Ms. James, you have any comments?
I think I've said enough. I'm just teasing. Trying to break the ice. No, I think the word itself defines the difference. Local is where you live day to day, and the day-to-day operations, right? And those that govern that. And so the national is a country. I'm going to use a policy that's nationally, that is not very local, even in municipalities across the 50 states that we live in. And that's baby bonds. Baby bonds, which is a policy that is being considered by and led by Congressman Cory Booker. So if that policy is passed, if it is, and he's been fighting for that now for quite some time, for baby bonds, if that policy is adopted, then that's a national policy, but it can impact us locally, because it means that every child that's born in the United States would receive that $50 deposit for the duration of their life until they're 18, from their local state government. And so that's why that's a contentious thing, because what they say nationally has to be adopted locally.
All right. Well, my next question was going to be, and you guys have already elaborated on this a little bit. If you want to touch on it some more, by all means do so. But can you tell our viewers what's the difference between a vote for the Trump administration versus a vote for the Harris administration? We've had 4 years of each. And so what would be the difference between a vote for one or the other?
I'd love to go first.
Go ahead.
And this is not under my official capacity at Ed Trust Louisiana. This is Sierra Hart talking as an individual. Vice President Kamala Harris, one, has a priority to expand the amount of dollars that go into HBCUs. As an HBCU graduate myself, that's something that's very important to me. I believe that it is a bedrock of our community. Southern University, Grambling University, Xavier University, all of our historically Black colleges deserve the funding that they have been robbed of from the local government, from our literally our governor's offices have money from HBCUs instead of pouring money into HBCUs. So to have a federal investment, to me, would make a difference in the lives of so many. I also look at what it means to be able to bring a child into this world and have somebody who is championing the right of a woman to choose what happens with her body, who also believes in police reform. We see what happens in our communities when it comes to police brutality and our relationship with police. Vice President Harris has championed not only police reform, but ensuring that police are held accountable, while former President Trump believes that police should have and there are just a plethora of issues on both sides that just come down to one thing, and that is who puts out for the middle class and for people who look like me, who look like you. And for me, that's only one choice, and that is Vice President here.
Thank you, Sierra. Anyone else want to elaborate?
Well, what I'm going to say is I'm going to have to abstain, but I'm going to give an opinion because I'm on this panel as a representative of the Middleburg Institute, which is a 501c3 organization, and we can't support or any one candidate. So I'm thinking if I gave my opinion, it may look as if I'm supporting one or the other. But what I will say is that I would encourage those that are listening to look at the platform of the candidate. Choose the candidate of your choice, but vote and look at what candidate is speaking to your interest and what do you think is best for you and your community, not just you, yourself, and I. We have certain folks that are just about, and just look at what candidate is speaking to your interest and what would make not only your quality of life, but your community, your future, your legacy, your children. What platform are they running on, and the promises that they make, are they in line with what you want for your community?
One has a middle class agenda, and the other is trying to take care of the rich. The tax cuts that were implemented by the Trump administration are still intact. In fact, they don't expire until 2025. And so, the Harris plan is a plan for middle America. And speaking from as a person who was below middle class and trying to work himself out of poverty to get to middle class, it means a lot. It means a lot, and I think it means a lot to the average American having the opportunity to move, to not only get an education but to start a business or to get a job that pays a living wage is valuable, and it makes a difference between living a quality life versus not being able to do that. So I think the contrast between the candidates is stark, and it's clear that one is trying to help out average people, the other one is trying to give it all to the rich.
Thank you all. So moving on to the next question, how can elected officials affect inflation?
Well, when you think about the previous Trump administration, we saw an increase in inflation because there were less requirements for what it took to take out loans at the bank. So, for example, if you had a small business, the requirements to be able to go in, get a $20,000 loan were much smaller than the requirements that exist now. And when the requirements are less, obviously more people have access. And when more money is being printed, then that means there are higher costs. And so we are seeing the results of that now. Also, during that time, we were dealing with the pandemic. And during the pandemic, there were $600 unemployment checks going out, which families needed for those who could not work. But there's a cost when that much money is being shelled out from the government. And so it really is up to the government to be able to create financial stability, not only within our corporations, but in our communities. And I think the first thing that we do from a federal standpoint, our elected officials can hold businesses accountable to ensure that if inflation is happening, that we aren't looking at price gouging. So you'll see businesses like Kroger, for example, just came out and said that they increased their prices despite knowing that inflation existed in our community. So making sure that there is a cap on how businesses can increase the price of our food at grocery stores is a way to mitigate inflation, but also holding banks accountable to level their prices when it comes to what they're giving out in terms of loans and grants to community members. There has to be a balance, unless our economy will suffer for it.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I'm gonna leave that up to Mr. Jackson, I think about how do we, I think it has something to do with the Federal Reserve, with the way that they do interest rates or whatever, but I'm really not sure how we can manage. And it's not that that's an excuse. We have to come up with some idea of how we can mitigate inflation. Is it because just things are going up? You hear people just make, they just kind of say, well, everything is high, everything is going up. But why is it? Why is it that eggs cost this much? Is it supply and demand? What is it? So I don't have a clear answer to that. Maybe
Yeah.
a former policymaker may be able to explain it, but I've never understood how we get to inflation. I
Yeah.
just never understood it.
Yeah. Joyce, I think you're hitting, and Sarah, I think you're hitting on the issues that existed at the time. I mean, we were faced with a pandemic. It was something different, something that we never had an opportunity to deal with before, and because of it, there was money pushed into the hands of the citizens in order to combat the lack of an economy. When you look at the economy and how we fare in the United States as opposed to some of the economies in the world, the United States fared decent. Many thought we were going into a recession. We never went into a recession, and so it appears to me that the influx of capital into the system was a necessary thing. Yes, it probably pushed the system to the brink and caused some inflation. However, it certainly didn't break our system, and because of the way we managed the affairs of that time coming out of the recession, George, you talked about the interest rates and how we were able to adjust interest rates accordingly. I think all of that happened in a way that helped keep us balanced as an economy. I would not say uh, that because of the influx of money, it was a detrimental to our economy because we fared. Obviously, we never went into a recession. But to answer the question, uh, the Biden administration managed itself through that. If you look at the Trump administration didn't want to impose any type of economic recovery mechanism under the circumstances of the COVID pandemic. And I think we suffered greatly because of their inability to act, as opposed to the Biden administration and their ability to help manage us through that. So electing folks kind of understand economics and understand what's necessary for average Americans, I think ultimately benefited our economy in the long run.
And I would also just add that if we would pay people a living wage, at least $15 an hour,
Yeah.
then even if inflation did exist, it would combat that because people could afford no matter if the prices went up or down.
Thank you all. So we're down to our final few questions. So I will start the next question by mentioning the 2010 Supreme Court decision in Citizens United. So our question is, how can we influence overturning that Supreme Court decision in Citizens United? And just, I don't know if everybody knows what that decision was, but it was a decision where the Supreme Court reversed campaign finance restrictions and made it possible for corporations and outside groups to spend unlimited funds in elections.
Wow. I must say this. I'm gonna apologize, but I have to leave. I have another. We're preparing to get ready for the governor's tax of fiscal cliff legislation. I'm sure you're familiar with it, Ms. Hart and Mr. Jackson. So I need to leave, but I want to just leave with this when you talk about the campaign. Um, I've always questioned the amount of money that's poured into campaigns for the amount of money that actually the people who are running make. So you spend millions of dollars to get a job that pays you maybe 1% of what you spent. And I think because we see that the more money you have, the better campaigns you can run and all of that. And while I guess that would be considered good, you can run a good campaign, is it really, does it keep people honest? In other words, or does it keep you in the back pocket of someone because they've given you millions of dollars, or they've given you these perks and things of that nature? I That's another thing that I'm perplexed by and have never been able to get a clear answer from a policymaker when it comes to campaign financing. So I know y'all gonna be glad to see me go.
Of course not, Miss
No.
Jane.
It's been a pleasure, Miss Hart. It's been an absolute pleasure. Also, Mr. Jackson, I hope that you would consider getting back in the game. We need folks like you. Miss Morrison, thank you so very much for being such a gracious host and a facilitator. But I really need to go. We got a fight coming up, and I need to go get some education on about what we need to do to talk with Governor Landry. So
Thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule
Thank you,
to
Joyce.
contribute to this conversation.
Thank
all
you, Miss.
righty, y'all take care.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Vote. All right.
All right. Anyone else want to contribute to that response?
Yeah, I think that the argument we talk about the Citizens United decision is probably one of the most impactful things that's happened in politics over the last 10, 12 years now. I think that decision came out in 2010, but it's totally changed the game in terms of the amount of money that's being put into politics, into elections. I mean, you look at from 2020, I think 2006, it's $5 million, as opposed to 2012, 6 years later, it was almost $300 million that came in to impact elections. And so the most dangerous part of it, I think, Andrea, is that you don't know where the money is coming from. And so, it basically says that, if you're a corporation, that you can make contributions to causes that support a particular, platform of a candidate, not the candidate itself, but to that platform, but you don't know where the money is coming from. And so the question that begs the question is the question that I just presented was where is the money coming from? I mean, is it coming from foreign governments, or is it coming from third parties that are anti-American? We don't know. And so and because that's the case, it certainly alters the dynamics by which candidates and political agendas are formed. And so hopefully at some point we can look at a constitutional amendment. That's one way of maybe dealing with overturning that decision, or balancing the Supreme Court in such a way that you have it's not dictated by politics like it has been over the last 8 years, but you have a Supreme Court that expresses the will of the and looks like the body of the country, as opposed to just a political I guess the political ideology of one particular party.
Yeah. I would
I'm
just
sorry.
Yeah, I would just add to that. It creates a moral disadvantage for me, because when you do have this mass amount of money coming from corporations and flooding into elections, what you see is it creates an uneven playing field for people who are running. So, for example, I ran for the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education as a school teacher. I raised $10,000 of small dollar donations against candidates who had millions coming in from PACs. And so, although I'm sure we worked as hard with like getting our feet on the ground and hitting the pavement, when you are dealing with outside entities who want to influence our elections, unfortunately, you don't get to see the real fruit of the candidate because it's compromised by money. And you could hope that those candidates aren't bought by money, but a hope is only a hope until you know for sure, right? And so I think it creates that unfair, unethical picture for communities to then have to decipher what the character is of our elected officials on top of everything else we're asking them to do.
So with that, how do we liberate our politicians from these super PACs and the dark money and the anonymous donors?
Liberate, that's a good word. I say by people power. By making ourselves engaged and informed and building relationships with our elected officials so they know that they have support. Because if an elected official feels that they have the support of the people, then the money won't sway them because they know they could have 200 people that will knock doors for them, that will show up to a meeting, that will be able to fight against the issue that they know they're bringing to the forefront. They'll have that support. But if they are unsure if the people are going to get to the polls, if they're unsure that the community is going to support them, then they'll lean on these ulterior motives. So as people, we need to make ourselves educated and available to be a resource to our elected officials so that we could mobilize people power to help them create change, because they can't do it by themselves. The same way we want to hold them accountable, I believe they should hold us accountable to make ourselves educated to do that.
I couldn't agree more with what Sierra said. I think the thing that influenced me most was being held accountable by the folks that I represented. We used to do it by way of community meetings. When I was there, but having to have a conversation with somebody who did not like the way I voted or wanted to influence the way that I voted meant a great deal. And I think that that's a way of balancing this thing out. Money is not the only thing. It's true, and it's said that money is the lifeblood of politics, and to a certain extent, that's true. However, I think people underestimate the influence and the impact that they can bring to the process by participating in some format. Mm-hmm. This format, calling your representative, letting them know how you feel about a particular issue. It has an impact.
It does. Especially if you're consistent.
Yeah.
All right, thank you all. We are getting to the top of the hour, so I will ask if you have any final closing comments. We'll start with Ms. Sierra Hart.
I would just encourage every single person to vote. If you are just questioning if your vote matters, if it's important, I'm just here to remind you that it is. We have so much at stake. For our federal government, we have two candidates. One wants to remove the Department of Education and one does not. I would say that the Department of Education is one that is extremely important because that is how we ensure that equity happens across our school districts. We have an important mayoral race. We have city council races. I believe in Louisiana and what it can be, and it is up to us to be able to go to the polls and be able to make a difference. So I just encourage you to use your power. Don't let the system take it from you because it will attempt to. It is up to you to empower yourself, but also to empower those around you who are confused on if they should vote. So if you learned something tonight, please share this with them and share a message or a note, something that you got so that somebody else can go to vote with you. Bring 10 people if you need to, but we need to show up and we need to show out. And thank y'all for me.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Yeah. Again, great comments, Sierra. I couldn't agree with them more. Vote often and always is the same, as the saying goes, but also educate yourselves and become informed about the issues. When more people understand what the true issues are and are able to talk about and articulate in settings where it's not traditionally talked about, barbershop, beauty shops, in the grocery store, those types of conversations have a great deal of impact. Influencing your family, talking to your own family members about the not only the races but the issues that are going forward. Informing men and women about the issues. One of the things that we didn't talk about very much is the fact that it appears as though Black men are, we participated at lesser rate than Black women. However, it seems like Black men may not be as excited about our choices at the top at the presidential level as some of our women are. We need to talk about that and what it means and why some of us are not participating in the process for that reason. But we do better when we know better. So information is key. Let's talk about it at church. I mean, we don't have to talk about supporting a particular candidate, but you can certainly talk about the issues that matter to the people. And so, again, thank you, United Christian Faith Ministries, for having this forum and being willing to engage and talk about these things because they matter to people in the natural state in which we live in, but they can impact the way that we move forward as Christians. So thank you.
Thank you both again for participating on this panel. We hope that the information and discussion has been thought-provoking to our viewers and that it prompts them to action. I want to remind everyone that our elections are coming up November 5th. Early voting begins on October 18th. Let's get out and vote and let's take some folk with us. Thank you all.
Thank you.